Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story talking about predatory lawsuits, how people are actively coming after other corporations and money, and how it's actually happening from outside of our own country and how they're using it to fund their operations. And of course, we will end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. Do we live in a sue-happy society? And do we sue too much? What is your opinion? Throw it down in the comment section. I want to hear what you have to say. Trust me, you'll hear my opinion, and maybe you don't agree beforehand. Hopefully you do after, but who knows? So with that said, the article itself actually comes from the Daily Wire. Headline reads, "Time to Stop Predatory Foreign Investors." Now, this is a premise that is absolutely fascinating. No longer are investors simply going to stocks and bonds and ETFs or even crypto or other indices in order to gain value from the United States and its market, but rather they're also actively backing lawsuits against large companies that they could possibly win damages in order to have a little bit of a kickback. They'll have somebody that they fund within the United States who is possibly damaged by these companies, and then you are able to profit off of this by saying, hey, we're going to give you a small cut, and then we will take the rest of it. So there's a few different ideas that Daily Wire proposes here, but we'll actually lay out the first thing here. Quote, "There is, however, a real opportunity to stop this litigation abuse through the budget negotiation currently underway in Congress. Foreign investors are using our U.S. court systems to punish American companies and citizens while enriching themselves. Since litigation is so costly, risky, and time-consuming, many companies often agree to settle even when the case lacks real merit, because the risk of going to a trial is simply too high." End quote. Now, this actually underlies, in my opinion, a more important thing to talk about, which is we live in a sue-happy society. We live in a society where we more than happily, and I say sue-happy society, and actually maybe even a more than sue-happy society, a grievance, give me my slice of the pie society, where instead of possibly leaving some sort of grace, even on an individual level, people in your community, you will sue them if something goes wrong, if there's damage to your property, if there's accidental problems that arise between you. Now, that's not to say that suing doesn't have its place, and I do believe that with malice intent, in intentionally breaking the law rather than on an accidental level, there needs to be remedy, recourse, punishment to these different corporations. Though I even think if we were to take it to its absolute maximum, which I don't think is practical, I think it is idealistic, I would say that most of the repercussions that come of these problems are actually something that should be levied against, if they're judged against, levied against the corporations and maybe even municipalities. And you can make an argument for people, though I think it's a tenuous one. They would have penalties that go against these different entities that are said to have violated the law in some way or caused damage to somebody else, and then the other person has, on top of that, their legal bills paid, but they don't actually get a financial compensation. Their compensation is making sure that our laws are enforced and that we have a just judicial system, and we are actually abiding by these laws that we have elected officials to make, and therefore actually create a cohesive social system that doesn't actually encourage people to simply sue for money, but rather sue for the right reasons, which is they are violating the letter of the law. Now, I think, of course, you can make an argument for quantifiable damages, especially in cases of malice rather than accidental incidents. And I've had this conversation back and forth with some coworkers. But in those cases where you can actually quantify damages, I think when you can put a number on it, and this is living in the practical world rather than the idealistic world, I think most people can accept that, and I think honestly we can live with that because you're compensating them for the damages that you have caused, but you're not overly compensating them beyond what they would have to pay for medical bills or something to this effect. And why this is important is it restricts the bad actors from taking advantage of the system, which is exactly what these foreign investors are doing. And the Daily Wire actually has some interesting ideas about how they shut this down, and I think it goes a little too far in the anti and libertarian inside me, but that is not to say that the point is lost. And also, the reason it goes too far is because it is saying that the issue is foreign companies taking advantage of it and restricting it to foreign companies, when realistically, there's a much simpler solution, which is actually not infringing upon people's rights in the first place by allowing these type of litigations to go forward, which is actually restricting the amount of payout that you can get from these certain types of litigations, which therefore removes the incentive for foreign nations to continually invest, quote unquote, in these sort of practices, but also it changes the societal fabric that we operate within and removes the incentive for individuals to be bad actors and try to fleece down corporations, municipalities, so on and so forth, for more money. Now, is it always the case that people are fleecing them down? No, there are a lot of good lawsuits that get brought, and that's why, of course, in these cases, I propose that we have a just compensation fee and also a legal fee compensation baked into it. Now, the just compensation one would be harder to argue, as it should be, but the legal fee one, if they win, is very, very easy to enforce, which is, hey, they were just trying to remedy a wrong. We didn't want to incur an extra cost on them in order to actually uphold the societal system that we live in. So the winner will have their bills paid for by the corporation that was proved, or even in certain cases, the people that were proved to have done wrong with malice intent. And that catches these exact situations as well, because the investors are actually doing this with malice intent. They're doing this to strip corporations of their money, therefore their value, and that also strips the society of the value that the corporation or the company can possibly create with said money. I think that is malicious action, and the results are not necessarily quantifiable directly, but we can definitely see the knock-on effects when trying to restrict and remove this incentive that is in place. So let's actually get into what their proposals will be. Excuse me. Quote, Tillis-Hearn Tackling Predatory Legislation Funding Act. This is something that was actually proposed by both of them for the sign-off of American courthouses, and it amends the tax code to impose a new tax on income from litigation, which is received by third-party entities that provide financing for such litigation. So this would actually not just affect foreign companies, but it would also affect U.S.-based companies, which actually, I think there's a good argument here that there are certain law firms that actively take advantage of some of these situations and say, hey, we'll only take a small percentage of this after the litigation is done, and tentatively, effectively, they are actually fundraising. They are actively paying for the operations of these lawsuits, and they are basically saying, we'll cover the cost for a commission at the end. Though their commissions are normally not more than 50%. I mean, most of the time it's like 10%. These are small numbers. But even the attorneys that go on to do this and have outrageous fees and basically bankroll these litigations and go out and make class action lawsuits in order to and pay most of the costs of these people in order to get larger compensations on their end when they win the case. I think that this could also mitigate some of those effects, though. Like I said, it could go further, and honestly, it should go further. What do we want a society that actively has members and has a culture of give me my piece of the pie, or do we want to encourage a system where people do not see it as a pie that is divided up and they're just trying to grab their slice off the table before somebody else does? Or do we want to encourage people to have a little bit of grace and acknowledge that the pie will continue to grow if people act within, and if the economic conditions are right, of course. We're not trying to pretend as though they always will be, but a society that's based around giving people the benefit of the doubt and rather trying to steal from them will actually not have downward sloping trends of people siloing off their share of the pie. They'll be more willing to share it, charity and so on and so forth. You have a lot of malicious actors who have taken advantage of this mentality that, I have to get mine. And you have people who just take advantage of the system in general. Nonprofits that don't actually do what they intend to do, and they're paying their executives with, 20% of the fees that they, or the money that they take in, is a great example. So we have to mitigate for the worst actors within our society, while also actively encouraging, and by encouraging in this case, we're actually limiting the power of the government, encouraging a societal change in how we interact with one another. Do we say that people deserve a little bit more grace, or do we allow for a more cynical worldview where you take yours when you get it? And of course, they're not a one-to-one correlation. There are many other things that play into this, but when you look around, and the joke is commonly within America, hey, just sue them. That is literally, something goes wrong, hey, just sue them. This is not what the first response should be, in my opinion. It is not the one of a healthy society. It is not the one of a healthy people that constantly question how they can try to take money from other people, rather than say, I don't necessarily need the money, but I want to ensure that our society is better off. Then again, people will argue that the money is a good way to actually encourage people who are afraid to stand up in order to remedy this and change society. The money is a good incentive. Fair enough. I think we could have that practical argument, but to pretend as though this is as cut and dry as some people want to pretend it is when it comes to the suit culture conversation, it's a fascinating one. Throw it down in the comments down below what you think at this point. Do you have a different perspective from the beginning? If you don't, tell me why. Obviously, there are counter arguments. I've heard some of them. I haven't heard all of them, and I want to hear yours. So with that said, let's jump into our daily delight. This one comes from our friends at Dog Time, and the headline reads, "Dog looks at toys with dreamy eyes" in heartwarming video. And one of the funny comments from the person who posted this, which is, the handle is something like "guy and a golden," get you a dog, get you a significant other that looks at you like this dog looks at their toys, essentially. The video is absolutely adorable. It has some romantic music thrown over the top of it. And if you just want to read the article and have a smile on your face after doing so, it will be linked in the description below. The like and subscribe button. Also down there you can find the direct link to this article that we were talking about, so you can read the entire thing, because there is more context that I provided. Also down there you can find the link to the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 6 and 6 on Tuesday and Thursday. 6 and 6 is all about 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. It's international news. So, with all the plugs out of the way, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.